My presentation is on the Barracoon, the story of the last black cargo. As an introduction, we're introduced to Cujo Lewis, who is the survivor of the Atlantic slave trade between Africa and the U.S. He was taken from a region of Western Africa called Dahoma and was part of the Dahomey people. He was taken during the Dahoman year, which was a year of war and festivals within the region, and brought illegally aboard the Clotilda in Mobile, Alabama. The captain of the Clotilda was Captain Foster, and he was later owned by the Maher brothers, Jim, Tim, and Burns. A barracoon, which means barracks in Spanish and derives from barraca, meaning hut, is a structure that were used to detain Africans who would be sold or exported from Europe or the Americas. Africans were forced into these slave houses after being kidnapped, captured during the wars, or trekked in from interior regions of the continent, of this case being Africa. In these, many would die from physical conditions and the brutality they faced. During their 3 to 6 month travel duration and years of work, they continued to live in these and traveled throughout. Cujo Lewis and among other Africans lived with Captain Burns Maher on his plantation. On the plantation, he was forced to work for 5 years and 6 months until granted freedom. During this time, the Emancipation Proclamation was also passed. In Africa, Cujo and many other Africans' plan of life were to marry a wife, build a house, and have children, respectively. The only problem they faced was that the African people had no land to build a house, and a ticket back home to their country was too expensive. Captain Foster and the Maher brothers told them to work harder and save money for transportations if they wanted to go back to their homeland. So, their work included working at the sawmills, powder mills, gardening, making baskets, and selling what they harvested and made. But that still wasn't enough money to save, as the tickets were too expensive. The African people decided to elect one of their own to try to reason with one of the brothers, Tim, about giving them some land. Goompa, a noble man back in Dahomey, was elected as head of the group and elected Cujo to speak to Tim Maher about the land. One day, Cujo cut down a tree and confronted Tim as he was sitting on the stump that he just cut. Cujo said to him he misses his home, but Tim said he has a good home here. But even with the mobile of which they were living on, the railroad and all the banks surrounding them were not a home to Cujo. He demanded to get taken back so he may build a home and start a family. He even stated this quote, "You made us slave, now they make us free, but we ain't got no country and we ain't got no land. Why don't you give us a piece of this land so we can build ourselves home?" Tim also rebuked by saying, "I can't sell land that I've already sold, of which he owned. You either save money and get a ticket or stay here." As Goomba the head, he also elected JB and Kibi, who were other members of of the people, as judges, and decided to build their own freedom. They decided to make laws which were don't steal, don't get drunk or hurt anybody, and if someone does wrong, they must appear in front of the judges. Their whole plan to somehow build up their freedom was to work hard, save money, eat nothing but bread and molasses, and if they see something that they like, they must not buy it so they can save up the money. Eventually, they all saved up enough money to buy some land, and Cujo receives 1.5 acres for doing his part of talking to Tim, but didn't build a house yet because he didn't have a wife. Their tactic was all for one, for which all the people helped build houses for each other rather than paying someone else to build it for them. The village they made was called African Town because they wanted to go back home, but since they couldn't, due to the expenses, they did their best to bring what they remembered from Africa to them. They were also told by one of their friends, which they referred to as Free George, to get a religion and join a church, to which they built the old landmark Baptist Church. Marriage. So Cujo eventually meets a woman named Abila, also known as Celie as her American name, and get married after 1 month. They converted to Christianity, but the church told them they need to have a marriage license. They had no idea because in Africa, there's no need for a license to be married. It was simply just to agree to marry, and then live together. But Cujo decided to go with the Western ideals and incorporate them with his own, and got the license, but he said he doesn't feel any different with Abila than without it. He stated, she a good woman, and I love her all the time. So basically, he just got the marriage license to be accepted and seen as being part of the Western practices, and after converting to Christianity, began integrating it with his worldview of Africa and America. 10 months after their marriage, Cujo and Abila have their first child. They eventually go on to have 6 children, 5 boys and 1 girl. Each of their children had an African name and an American name. Ya Jimmy was to Alec, Anonoto was Jimmy, Polidau was not given in the text, Atenia was David, Fishiton was Cujo, and Ubuosi was Sealy. Because of these Western ideals that Cujo wanted to incorporate with his own, he also changed his name, which was originally Ulolule or Kasula, and changed it to Cujo Lewis, which is what he has now. Facing ignorance. The American folks would always taunt Cujo's children by calling them names such as ignorant savages, monkey, and saying that they kill people and eat their meat, otherwise known as cannibals. So because of this taunting, their children will fight other children, to which one parent said to them, yo boy mighty bad, Cujo. We afraid they gonna kill somebody. And they also say that their boys were so bad that they weren't Christian. Cujo and his people try to raise their children right so they don't act up while facing the Americans. They even built a schoolhouse and got a teacher. But they still faced tauntings and discrimination from the Americans. The quote that Cujo said to the other boys' parents was, "You see the rattlesnake in the woods. If you bother with him, he bites you. If you know the snake kill you, why you bother with him? Same way with my boys, you understand me? If you leave my boys alone, they not bother nobody." During the times that Cujo was living on the land, they faced their first heartbreak, which was when Cujo's and Abila's daughter, Sealy, falls ill. They get money to get her a doctor and medicine, but she still dies at 15 years old. They gave her a traditional Christian funeral and buried her on the church grounds. During the service, Cujo was singing "Shall We Meet Beyond the River," but inside, he was singing in his native tongue. He also built a fence around her grave because he hated to see her all lonesome and wanted to provide her extra protection even though she was already gone. 9 years later, his other son, Fishiton, was shot and killed by the deputy sheriff. The deputy sheriff said he was scared to face Fishiton and hid in the butcher's wagon. Fishiton came up to the wagon from the shop he was working at to talk business, but the sheriff came out and shot him in the neck. He also claimed that he was scared that Fishiton was going to shoot him at first, but Fishiton was unarmed. Fishiton fought for his life for 2 days and 2 nights until passing. During this time, Fishiton's mother, Abila, said, "Cujo, Cujo, Cujo, baby, put whip to your horse," which basically means keep fighting, do not lose that wind. It was also known that the sheriff was also a pastor at Hay Chapel, which Cujo found absolutely debilitating since he was also a Christian. During his lifetime, Cujo was filled with heartbreak and loss. He also stated, "It only 9 years since my girl died. Look like I still hear the bell toll for her when it toll again for my Fishiton, my po African boy that don't never see African soil. Later on, all throughout Cujo's life, the rest of Cujo's children died either from disappearing, sickness due to lack of medical care provided for them, or killed, such as Fishyton. The importance of Cujo's stories I have found or took the most out of was that even when Cujo and the people were all granted freedom, they still weren't granted full freedom. They were not seen as equal to the American legal and economic system, such as when the Mayer brothers would not give them pay for their tickets back home, would not provide them transportation back, and basically told them, make your own money or just deal with it. Cujo saw that even though they were free, they weren't really free from the Americans' grasp on everything they need. Land, which was refused to be given by some of the Mayer brothers, and legal funds, which in another case, Cujo and his son sued a railroad company and won the case, but didn't see a single cent after winning. They also faced severe xenophobia and discrimination, which I could still see today in today's society, but during this time, he faced so much brutality and heartbreak through his life, and by seeing others being beaten to death during the Barracoon, decapitated, whipped, and more. I also saw that cultural relativism was also lightly highlighted, because rather than forcing his African practices on Western land and the people there, he decided to incorporate it and respect both of them. He even converted to Christianity and gave the rest of his children proper Christian funerals, and decided to spread it with the people around him that he also lived with. He saw that it was best to incorporate their ideals with his own, but he still never truly saw himself as welcome due to the American discrimination and power they had against African Americans. Thanks.